Now, you may have seen some headlines about new genetic discoveries in autism, but let's be honest, most of them are either fear-mongering or heavy on the jargon. But we're cutting through the noise, my friends, because a new study has revealed that autism isn't a single genetic thing. Instead, it's actually made up of at least 4 biologically distinct subtypes, each with its own genetic story, life challenges, and yes, practical implications for autistic people of all ages. So let's go. Welcome, my stars of Orion. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Orion Kelly, that autistic guy. I'm all about providing validation and support for autistic people and their loved ones. All right, so this research comes from a team led by Litman and published in Nature Genetics, pretty much the big league of science journals, in July 2025. Now, they didn't just poke around the edges. They analysed over 5,000 autistic kids and nearly 2,000 of their non-autistic siblings. This is from that huge Spark cohort, dipping into over 230 different traits. The obvious ones, like social and communication stuff, and the not so obvious ones, like developmental milestones, co-occurring mental health conditions, and day-to-day living skills. But here's where it gets cool. Instead of treating autism as one monolithic blob, they used advanced machine learning to actually find patterns in all that data. And what they found could be game-changing. Now, before we dive into this, I just want to quickly talk about how this study was actually done, the methodology, okay? Because I know a lot of us get suspicious whenever the media yells, "new research," without telling us what's behind it. Spoiler alert, this isn't just some small focus group or a review of previous studies. This is new, original science with serious scale and rigor. And here's what the research actually did. So they started with the Spark Autism cohort, which, if you haven't heard of it, is the world's largest genetic study of autism. We're talking over 5,000 autistic kids and nearly 2,000 of their non-autistic siblings, all in one giant data set. And instead of only looking at one part of autism, the team examined over 230 different traits. That means not just the classic social and repetitive behaviors, but also things like when kids started talking or walking, how they do with daily living skills, and whether they have co-occurring conditions like ADHD or anxiety. And then, this is where it gets sciencey. They used advanced machine learning, think computer algorithms, looking for patterns humans might miss, to group these thousands of participants based on the unique combinations of traits they actually have in real life. And after finding these groups, the researchers dug into each one's genetics. They compared common genetic differences, rare inherited variants, and de novo mutations, so brand new genetic changes that pop up in the child but not the parents, to see how each subtype's biology was different. So this is not a study based on opinions or broad overviews of other research. It's original, peer-reviewed science using a huge sample size, hard data, and powerful technology to answer the big question: why does autism look so different from one person to the next? So, with that in mind, let's get to the 4 subtypes and see where you or your loved ones might see yourselves reflected. Instead of thinking of autism as one spectrum, where everyone just falls somewhere along a line, this study says, no, it's probably more like 4 overlapping, very real biological subtypes. So let's meet the cast, my friends, and find out which character you've been playing all this time, you masking autistic person. Number 1, social and behavioural challenges. Now, this is actually the largest group. About 37% of autistic people in this study make up this group. It's what most people imagine when they think classic autism. So the traits are social communication differences, repetitive behaviours, difficulty reading subtle social cues, and finding group conversations overwhelming. Practical examples could be you might be great at remembering timetables, trains, planes, these kind of things, but totally miss when someone's being sarcastic at work. You also crave routines and clearly get thrown off if they're even slightly out of order. Like if someone used the shower first when you always shower first. Even as an adult, new social situations feel like you're walking onto stage with no script and no idea what's expected. In this subgroup, you may have to mentally rehearse phone calls, replay conversations for hours afterwards. Often, there's a side serving of anxiety or ADHD on the menu. Maybe you get super fixated on your interests, but struggle to start projects or remember appointments. Development of the people in this subgroup. So milestones like walking or talking were usually on time. Okay, well that would be why you might have gone undiagnosed. Genetics, higher polygenic risk for ADHD and depression, meaning lots of little genetic influences that stack up. And some genes only become active after birth. You are born with them, but they become active later. Subtype number 2, mixed ASD with developmental delay, making up about 19% of autistic people in the study fell into this group. Listen to these traits. So it's autism paired with clear developmental delays, like late walking, talking, needing extra support for things like potty training, toilet training. Practical examples, you or your child didn't even say your first words well until after 2. Or maybe you didn't walk independently until 3 or 4. You might have needed physical or speech therapy growing up. Maybe you still do. You may have taken longer to learn life skills. You might still be learning them. Things like tying your shoelaces, crossing the street safely. But once you get it, you can hold on to it. You have sensory issues, but they can be extra intense. You are triggered easier. Loud noises, food textures, new places, they can spark total shutdowns or meltdowns. And in this group, co-occurring conditions are less likely to have extra psychiatric diagnosis like anxiety or depression. And the genetics of this subgroup, more likely to have rare inherited gene variants, especially ones that affect how the brain builds connections before birth. Let's talk about subtype number 3, and this group is moderate challenges. Now, this group makes up about 34% of autistic people in this study. Their traits, listen carefully, fewer or milder autistic traits, generally typical development, and not many extra mental health issues. Practical examples. You might have flown under the radar for years. Maybe you got by in school, but social exhaustion or misunderstandings built up over time. You were able to hold down a job, maybe relationships, but it takes massive effort and downtime to recover from these types of relationships, jobs, from socializing, from changes in your routine. Sometimes you're the person who's called quirky or weird, different, awkward. But unless you're struggling, no one picks up on your differences. Does this sound familiar? You might stim subtly. So tapping, chewing pens, fiddling with rings, your own body, skin, to stay regulated. During long meetings, commutes, just periods of dysregulation. The genetics of this group, a moderate load of common genetic variants. So no overwhelming rare or de novo mutations. Genetic signals here are more middle of the road. So neither dominated by rare mutations nor overloaded with the common genetic risk seen in group 1. And the fourth and final group, broadly affected. Now listen to this. This is actually the smallest group, about 10%, but often the most profoundly impacted. Traits, significant developmental delays, pronounced social and communication differences, multiple psychiatric challenges. These could be mood swings, frequent shutdowns, intense sensory overload. Your day-to-day life often requires substantial support and care. Practical examples. You may have started therapies in early childhood, yet continue to need help with basic tasks as an adult. Verbal communication might be limited, or you may require assistive technology. So even familiar places or faces can sometimes feel overwhelming or not safe. You might be prone to extreme shutdowns or meltdowns when demands get too high, needing long recovery times. Now let's talk about the genetics of this group. This is the highest burden of de novo, so new, not inherited mutations, meaning changes that happen by chance and often affect brain development very early before birth. Now keep in mind, for autistic people watching or carers, friends, loved ones, that group is the smallest group, only 10%. So what does this mean for us? Why does this even matter? Well, for years, autism research has lumped everyone together and just sort of shrugged when things didn't add up. Now, this has led to confusion, missed diagnosis, and supports that don't actually fit real autistic people. What this study proves with hard genetic evidence is that the diversity we see in autism isn't just about severity or functioning, it's about entirely different genetic programs at play. Now, what does that mean for you, your loved ones? Let's talk about validation. Regardless of how your autism presents, it's not less than or not real enough because there are 4 distinct groups. Precision supports, this is a big one. See, in the future, knowing your autism subtype could actually help you or your loved ones get the right support sooner. That might be more mental health help or more intense developmental support, depending on your profile. This also provides really fantastic hope for adults. So even if you're diagnosed late in life like me, this research is pushing towards more tailored, respectful care rather than cookie cutter programs. Let's talk about the nitty gritty, just a quick science geek out. So some of these genetic programs are prenatal, meaning the differences start before you're even born. Others don't kick in until after birth, during early childhood or even later. So you're born with them, they just don't present until later. That explains why some autistic people show differences from infancy, while others blend in for years and then suddenly struggle when your demands change. Your capacity can no longer meet the demands of your life. So it's not about faking it, it's actually in the biology. Let's talk about the relevance for late diagnosed autistic adults. So if you're like me and you were diagnosed as an adult, or if you're sitting here wondering if you may well be autistic, this study is actually a pretty big deal. So let's talk about why. Well, first up, it's proof there's no expiration date on understanding yourself. Maybe you hit all your milestones growing up. Maybe you kept up academically. You may have even managed to blend in socially, right up until adulthood, or being married or having kids, when anxiety, burnout, maybe even relationship struggles started stacking up. Maybe you always knew you were different, but every checklist seemed to be about children or about classic presentations that just didn't match your life. This new research says you're not broken and you're not less autistic just because your journey looks different. There are entire genetic programs that mean your traits might have shown up later or more subtly. For example, if you're in that social and behavioral challenges group, so 37% of the group, it's not unusual for masking and camouflaging to keep you off the radar for decades until adult life stresses, work, relationships, parenting, trigger overwhelm or shutdowns. Maybe you're in the moderate challenges group, 34% of the group. All 4 put together, 34% the moderate challenges group. So you did okay in the system, but always felt like everyone else got a manual to social life and you didn't. It can take years to realize that your struggles with exhaustion after socializing or your intense need for routine are valid autistic traits. Or perhaps, even if you had developmental delays as a kid, you grew up in a time or place where autism just wasn't on anyone's radar. So you spent your life trying to catch up, never knowing why things felt so much harder for you. Now, here's why this crossover is so important. Late diagnosed adults often carry decades of self-doubt, missed support, even outright misdiagnosis. This study says the diversity in how autism presents across the lifespan isn't a flaw. It's the natural outcome of these different genetic programs and developmental timelines. It also explains why so many of us get diagnosed only after a child is identified, because the same underlying genes can run in families but present differently depending on subtype, life events, potentially even gender. Some practical examples. Maybe you're only now recognize that your so-called quirks, like scripting conversations, needing alone time after work, going completely non-speaking under stress, are actually just manifestations of your unique subtype. Perhaps you have an autistic child and are seeing clear overlaps, but also key differences. Like, this kid is just like me, but so not. This happens to me. Like, we experience differently. Our experiences don't line up always. See, those differences may literally start in different genetic pathways and timelines. You might look back and realize that the meltdowns or shutdowns you may have had at work in the past, or the friendship breakdowns, even the overwhelming sensory issues, weren't actually failures. Whoa, you're not a failure? They were your actual autistic traits expressing themselves in the context of adulthood. Clearly, this is just the start, but it means the research world is finally catching up to what autistic people have been saying for years. There's no one right way to be autistic. And of course, like all autism research, you can take it with a grain of salt and some healthy cynicism. There's no single origin story. But if you'd like to do more of a deep dive into the potential of a late autism diagnosis, check out my playlist, Autism Diagnosis for Adults.